For those of us who find ourselves in tune with the more mystical side of life, occasionally we are visited from people who have passed beyond the veil. And that's what happened to me this time last year. This is what we call Samhain. And we're going to talk about that story today. We're also going to talk about the importance of mental health treatment, addiction treatment, and why our country is so abysmally awful at this. Welcome to Misfit Grit. Long before I ever knew how to cook anything, let alone grow it, I ran in a very rough crowd, a punk rock scene, and it was gnarly. I'm talking all the drugs, the really yucky ones, the ones that make people unalived. And I know more people who have lost their lives than I can count on my fingers and toes. Luckily, I got out. I learned skills that I can use today. I have a family, and I was able to produce this. This is red potatoes, green cabbage, our homegrown and homemade kielbasas with a nice garlic on top. I also added some of our homegrown dill wheat in it because dill is the best. So let's go find a little bit more quiet space and time to talk about this chapter of my life and who came and visited me last year and what the heck happened when he did. Long before the Christians ever used the sign of the cross for their religion and their gods, the pagans have used it, and today we're going to use it while cleaning the windows. I clean the windows in the fall, not just to have clean windows, but also to make sure that no spirits that have come through the veil come in through the window. This is a portal that they could come in. My family tends to be contacted this time of year by those who have passed on, and we'll talk about one of those stories in a moment. And this is important to us because on my side of the family, as well as my husband's side, we have a lot of untreated mental illness, as well as addiction, untreated addiction, going back a lot of generations. And when you add all that up, it creates a lot of gunk in the family lineage. And sometimes they contact us, and it isn't pretty. So we're going to clean the windows today, and then I'm going to make the sign of the cross over, which means that the magic goes in all directions, and it's protection. That no one with maladaptive intentions is coming into my space. This space is cleansed, it's protected, and it's not for those who choose harm or wish it onto others. Our country is not great at dealing with mental health issues or addiction. And as I've mentioned before, I know lots of people who have lost their lives to it. These diseases of despair run in families. And just like a lot of families don't choose to deal with all that gunk, right? All that stuff going on inside, all that generational trauma, and then they choose to pass it on to the next generation. Our society does the same thing. Now, a lot of it's consumerism, right? Chasing shiny objects, bigger, better, faster, more, now, me. Chasing experiences. Maybe if you're more of my generation, a millennial, really into that experience, that comfort, making sure it looks good on the internet. What we don't do very well is go deep. And this even goes if you're going to be part of the Christian, the dominating Christian forces in our world, which now are in control of our country, and they like to punish people. Now, I don't know a whole lot about that religion, never been interested in it, but I know that there's a very strong punishing aspect to certain types of Christianity, and we sure see that, don't we? So this administration is not going to put forward any funding, and it's actually pulling funding for mental health treatment as well as addiction services, even though, thankfully, a lot of the overdoses from fentanyl have gone down in the last few years, which is wonderful. But we're not going to see that sustained. Instead of, we're going to see this nonsense about going into Venezuela and kind of this gobbledygook smoke and mirrors about how they're going to treat this or tend to the addiction or the drugs that come into this country. And really what they're doing is there's always a alternative motive. So what the oligarchs, what the Christian fascists want, what the president wants. They want to take resources that should be allocated for the people, for helping people get through these awful afflictions that go through generation after generation, through community after community. They're going to take those resources and they're going to give them for themselves. Right? That's definitely what they're doing right now. We can see that before our very eyes. They're going to take away insurance from people. They're going to make sure that the most vulnerable among us really become in servitude or in slavery just to survive. And that's the United States of America, and that's what we're facing and going into. I am choosing not to participate in that system, and I have my own methods. So we're going to go ahead and clean this window and make sure that nobody's coming in that doesn't need to come in. And I'm doing this before I tell you the story of what happened to my family last year, because I need to cross my T's and dot my I's, if you know what I mean. Because when you evoke certain names or certain images or stories or energies, they might come back. So these windows are actually extremely important to our family because they're brand new. And this is a topic for another day, but my family was able to get brand new windows put on our old, I don't know, it's like 120, 130-year-old mining house for free. And that's a topic for another day of how the heck we pulled that one off, but we did. So you can bet your buttons I'm going to be cleaning them. These are very important. All right, we're back in the kitchen now. And while I wash what is last of the tomatoes, the very last, unless someone drops off like 50 pounds of tomatoes on my doorsteps, which could happen, I'm very blessed. This is it. They're getting a little sad. I'm going to wash them. I'm going to dice them, pop them in the freezer so that we can eat them next week, because that's the point they're at. While I do this, let's talk about who visited me and what happened. So as I mentioned, when I was a young woman, I ran in a really rough crowd. So 20 years ago, let's say. I'm 38. So about 20 years ago, I met someone whom I'm going to call A.J. And he was in a punk rock band with a name so vulgar, I will not repeat it. He was a pretty nice guy as far as drug addicts, punk rock guys go. He really didn't want to hurt anyone. He was just out to hurt himself. He was a guitar player, and he had a big, thick, curly mop of blonde hair. He was quite the looker. He was a construction worker when he could hold a job, and us ladies did enjoy watching him work from behind, and those shorts would just drop a little too low. We ran together for about 2 years. We were in a relationship. We lived in Alabama. Originally, we're from West Michigan. That's where we were in the scene. And we moved down to Alabama during the recession, and that's where a lot of us were working down there on the Gulf, and we would work in restaurants. And he worked in construction, and he was clean. He even quit smoking. Huge. And we traveled around the country. We lived out of a truck for a few times, went to California, went down to Texas. We were just searching, right? We were searching for something to ease our woes, to ease our troubles. We had both grown up in really, unpleasant situations. He had experienced some terrible abuse as a boy. And as it typically goes in families, it wasn't addressed, unfortunately. So one day, AJ and I and another guy, we went out to the dunes of Lake Michigan, and we were going to make fish patties. And this was a recipe we were taught by a neighbor of ours when we lived in Alabama. So we lit a fire in the dunes, and we had our case of beer, and we put a big cast iron over the fire. Well, we were all fairly drunk, and before we know it, the oil was on fire. Now, poor AJ, not thinking, because he was drunk, took the beer case and tried to smother the fire by putting his hand over it, which resulted in a catastrophically awful burn on his hand. his right hand. Now remember, he was a guitar player, and he was devastated. He went to the emergency room. They did what they could for him. He went to physical therapy every day, and they ended up saving his hand and the mobility in his hand, because otherwise it would have healed like a claw. But they worked was these fingers right down in there. Oh, it was bad. His pinky swelled up the size of a chicken drumstick. It was really, really awful. This story is important. So AJ and I went our separate ways. AJ continued down the road of very hard drugs, particularly, waffling between heroin and crack cocaine. And I didn't speak to him for a few years. I was kind of known in that group for always trying to get people to get clean. So I hadn't spoken to him in a while, and things had gotten really bad for him. And he was out train hopping and hitchhiking, which was something a lot of us did, myself included from time to time. And I received a phone call one day. And it was AJ. It's been a few years. And here's what he said. So I pick up the phone, and it was a Texas number. And on the other line, "Hey, Catherine, how you doing?" It was AJ. I said, "Hey, man, how you doing?" "I'm all right." "Yeah, I'm all right." And we had a nice chat. He told me that he appreciated me and everything I had tried to do to help him. And he was down in El Paso, Texas. And I said, "Well, man, I hope you're staying clean." He said, "Well, you know how it goes." I said, "Yeah, man, I know how it goes." And he said, "Next time I come back to Michigan, let's hang out." I said, "Yeah, let's do that. Let's do that." We had a very nice talk. The next day I received a call from the same number. And it was early in the morning. Early to us, at our standards. 8 in the morning. I thought, what's he doing up? "Yeah, I'm just waiting for the beer store to open. So I thought I'd give you a call." So we had another nice talk. That was the last time I would ever speak to AJ, because 10 days later, he was found dead under a bridge with his dog by his side, who I had given to him as a pup. He had overdosed on heroin. A construction worker had found him. Truly terrible. Truly terrible. I believe he was 30 years old. I spoke at his funeral. His family asked me to speak because I was one of the people who cared about him and wanted to see him clean. I had seen him clean. I did care about him, and I still do. Life goes on. Years pass. About 12 years pass. 10 to 12 years. And last year, I was cooking apple pie preserves right here at this kitchen. Much like I'm cooking down apples and hawthorns today as well, and processing tomatoes. And I was water bath canning, and wouldn't you know, my hand goes right into that water, and I had a terrible burn. Not oil, thankfully, but water. Same fingers, same area. It hurt. And I was spitting mad, and I said, "What the God dang it," da-da-da-da-da, right? And as I'm sitting there bemoaning my poor miserable self that evening, it dawned on me that someone had come to visit. It was right before Samhain, or Halloween. And this is not the first time we've had people or spirits come to visit us this time of year. And I said, AJ visited me. This is him. And it clicked with me. It was clear as a bell. Said, maybe he had been here for a few days and I wasn't paying attention and he needed to get my attention. So we began leaving offerings for him. We put out some beer in a little cup, some little treats. I even had an old driver's license of his, and I sat by it. And I had an old beanie hat that I put there too. And we had a little offering by our fireplace for him for a couple weeks. And I said, yeah, man, you're welcome here. You can hang out. I see you're here. That's all right. I hope you're doing well. and we took care of him for a while. And wouldn't you know, one day, right before Samhain, the offering was knocked off of the little altar. Somehow it fell. And you know what went missing? That driver's license. And to this day, we have no idea where it went. This is not a very cluttered house. It didn't grow legs and walk away. But it's gone. And he left. I tell you this story in my kitchen with a smile and not over a campfire trying to frighten you. Because I'm not trying to make a spectacle of AJ's life or anyone who has lost their lives to the diseases of despair. This is very real. And these people and their spirits, they lived and they live on in many ways. And I honor him today and all the other ones I know. And I will be leaving offerings for them. Pour a little bit of wine out for them. Make sure they know that they are remembered, they are loved. And I hope you can do the same. And I hope that you can advocate for those who need it. And if you yourself are struggling, please, even if you feel that no one does care, and even if we'll never meet, I care. I sure do. So have a drink, have a glass of cider, and toast to all the AJs in your life. We're thinking of you. Happy Samhain.